Ever feel like the air itself has stories to tell?
Hmm. Interesting way to put it.
Well, today we're taking a deep dive into the world of the people who listen, air pollution
Oh,
analysts,
they're like, the detectives of the environmental world.
piecing together clues from the air we breathe.
Exactly.
We're going to be talking about things like career paths, essential skills for the job, and even how AI is changing their game.
Right. It's really remarkable.
And we've got some really fascinating sources lined up, career guides, interview advice, the works.
You know what I think is really interesting about this field?
Yeah.
It's way more diverse than people realize.
Really?
Yeah, it's not just lab coats and microscopes, although those are part of it.
You're telling me one source even compared air pollution analysts to, get this, environmental detectives.
Yeah.
They're out in the field gathering evidence, and then they have to analyze it to pinpoint the pollution sources.
It's true. It's true. It's real world problem solving.
Yeah.
It's about making that connection between, something as invisible as air quality and then like the very real impact it has on our health, the environment.
Yeah, that makes their job pretty crucial then, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's break it down. When we say air pollution analyst, what do they actually do?
Well, they do a lot, actually.
Mhm.
I mean, their work can range from going out and collecting air samples, like literally in the field,
Oh, wow.
to analyzing data in the lab, trying to identify the pollutants, which isn't always straightforward.
I bet.
And they work with all sorts of stakeholders, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you've got government agencies, businesses, even local communities.
Okay, so let's say someone listening is totally hooked. They love the environment. They want to get into this. What does it take to actually become an air pollution analyst?
Well, it's not just about loving the environment, although that definitely helps.
Right.
But our sources, they really emphasize having a really strong foundation in science,
Okay.
especially environmental science,
Mhm.
chemistry or a related field.
So that usually means a bachelor's degree is kind of your starting point.
Yeah, yeah.
But what about going beyond that initial degree? Is that something that's common in this field?
Yeah, and that's where it gets really interesting, right? Because you can get certifications, and those can be really valuable in this field.
Okay, like leveling up in a video game or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You've gained expertise in a specific area, and that can open doors to new opportunities, more responsibility.
I bet those certifications also look really good to potential employers, too. Like,
What?
you're serious about this.
Absolutely.
Our sources specifically mention a couple: becoming a certified air pollution control officer or a certified environmental professional.
Mm-hmm.
What do those certifications actually involve? Like, how do you get them?
Well, so take the Certified Air Pollution Control Officer.
Okay.
It usually requires a combination of education, experience, and then you've got to pass an exam.
Yeah.
And the exam often focuses on like specialized knowledge, like knowing the ins and outs of regulations, like the Clean Air Act,
Oh, interesting.
and how it affects businesses and industries.
So it's not even just about understanding like the hard science of air pollution. It's also about navigating the legal and the regulatory landscape, huh?
Exactly.
That's a side of the job I hadn't even thought about.
It's crucial. And that kind of knowledge, it often comes up during job interviews.
Oh, which is perfect because that brings us right to our next topic.
Yeah.
Landing a job as an air pollution analyst in today's market, it's competitive out there.
For sure.
What do our sources say about just totally acing those interviews?
Well, you got to be ready for anything, right? I mean, technical questions for sure, but then also questions that are really trying to gauge your soft skills.
Okay.
So, for example, you might get asked about your hands-on experience with air sampling methods, but then they might also ask you about a time you had to work with, like a team, to achieve some challenging goal.
So they're really looking for well-rounded candidates, not just like walking textbooks.
Exactly.
But speaking of technical skills, our sources also mentioned this field is changing so rapidly.
Yeah.
Particularly with the rise of, artificial intelligence.
It's not sci-fi anymore.
No.
Yeah.
I read one source that was talking about how AI is now being used to predict pollution hotspots.
Wow.
Which allows for like targeted interventions and could save, municipalities millions.
Yeah, it's amazing.
In healthcare costs. It's like AI is giving us this crystal ball into the future of air quality. But how does all this impact someone just starting out in their career? Like, do you need to be an AI expert from day one?
Well, I don't think you need to be an expert right away, but it's more about showing that you're aware of these technologies and you're eager to learn and adapt.
So instead of freaking out that you don't know everything AI, You can spin it, right? You can use it to your advantage in the interview, show them that you're adaptable and you're eager to learn new tools. That's got to be a good thing, right?
For sure. It shows you're curious, you're ready to jump in. And speaking of navigating a changing field, maybe we should talk about career paths. Because becoming an air pollution analyst, it's not a dead end.
Right.
I mean, there's so many directions your career could go. It's not a dead end at all. It's more like one of those choose your own adventure stories.
Oh, I like that.
You could decide to specialize in a really specific type of pollution.
Okay.
Like you could focus on industrial emissions, or maybe you're really interested in transportation-related air quality.
Some of the job titles our sources listed were so specific. Like I saw indoor air quality specialist. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's becoming a much bigger field now, especially as we're all becoming more aware of how, indoor environments can affect our health.
Yeah, for sure.
But you could also go in a much broader direction.
Right.
So you can become an environmental consultant, and then you're advising businesses or even government agencies on a whole range of environmental issues. And air quality is a part of that.
So you could be working on reducing a company's carbon footprint one day or advocating for stricter air quality regulations the next. That's pretty amazing.
Absolutely. It's very diverse, like we were saying.
But let's rewind a little bit. For someone who's just starting out in this field, maybe they're still in school, what are some tangible steps they could take to explore these different career options?
Well, our sources really emphasized networking and informational interviews. So actually, going out and talking to people who are already working in these jobs, those insights are really invaluable.
Yeah, getting that backstage pass, right?
Exactly.
To the industry, you can ask them about what their day-to-day looks like, what are the challenges, what skills do you actually use the most, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's a chance for you to show your enthusiasm, right?
Yeah.
You can make a good impression. You never know. Maybe that informational interview could even turn into a job later on.
That's true. Put yourself out there. Speaking of jobs, let's go back to those interview tips for a sec, because I'm always curious about the curveball questions that interviewers like to throw out there.
You mean the ones that kind of make you go, whoa, let me think about that for a second.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And you know what? They're not trying to trick you. It's more about seeing, can you think on your feet? How do you approach something, when you're not totally prepared for it?
It's like that old saying, the only stupid question is the one you don't ask. But in this case, it's the one you can't answer.
Well, maybe not can't answer, but how do you answer thoughtfully?
Right.
So for instance, they might ask you about a time you had to deal with conflicting data.
Uh-huh.
Or maybe, how would you explain this really complex scientific concept to someone who, doesn't have that technical background?
Okay, yeah, those are definitely challenging situations, even for people who've been in the field a while.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So what's the best way to approach those kind of questions?
I think preparation is really key. So before you go into any interview, really think about your past experience, projects you've worked on, even challenges that you faced, in school. And try to pinpoint the situations that really highlight, your skills. Like, how do you solve problems? How do you, analyze information? What about your communication abilities?
So it's like you're building up this arsenal of stories that you can pull from.
Exactly. Exactly. To illustrate what you're capable of.
Okay, that makes sense.
And don't be afraid to take a beat. If they ask you a tough question, you can pause, take a moment to gather your thoughts. It's much better to have a short pause and then deliver a really clear, well-structured answer than just rambling.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And this is where I think those AI-powered interview prep tools our sources mentioned could really come in handy. They could help you.
Yeah, they can. Analyze a job description and figure out, okay, what are some likely questions they're going to ask?
Yeah.
And then they could even, give you feedback on your answers. It's almost like having your own little personal interview coach.
That's so cool. Talk about using technology to your advantage. But beyond the technical stuff, beyond the interview, what other qualities do you think are really important for someone to succeed in this field? What are those intangible things that you need?
Oh, curiosity is huge.
Okay.
I mean, environmental science is constantly changing. There's always new research. You have to be a lifelong learner, always wanting to find out new information, asking questions.
You're always on the lookout, right?
It's like being that environmental detective we were talking about before.
Yeah.
Always looking for those new clues.
Love it.
And like a good detective, you need to be persistent, because addressing air pollution, it's a long game,
Yeah.
you know. There are going to be setbacks. There are going to be challenges, you know, sometimes even resistance to change. So you really got to be in it for the long haul.
Yeah, but that's where the passion comes in, right?
Yes.
It's like that fire in your belly that keeps you going even when it gets really tough.
Yeah, you got to care about it.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, this is about making a real difference. It's about protecting public health, you know, trying to keep our ecosystems healthy, creating a better future.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, and for future generations. I mean, this is important work.
It is. It's a mission worth getting behind, but it's not all like doom and gloom, right?
Right.
Because our sources also highlighted some really cool developments in the field, like especially when it comes to technology. Yeah, it does feel like we're like on the verge of a clean air revolution, you know?
Right. With all these new solutions coming out, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, like our sources were talking about how much we're using these low-cost air quality sensors now.
Oh, yeah.
And they're everywhere. It's not even just like, you know, government agencies. They're on street corners. They're in people's homes.
Mm-hmm.
It's giving us this like incredible amount of data on air pollution, more than ever before.
It's like we can finally see the air, you know, like all its complexity. But then what do you do with all that data?
That's the thing, right? Overwhelming. Data is useless if you don't analyze it.
Yeah.
It's just noise.
Right.
So air pollution analysts, they have to be really good at data science now too, using software, like really sophisticated software to look for trends,
Okay.
figure out where the pollution is coming from, and even like predict what air quality is going to be like in the future.
Wow. So you're not just like, mixing chemicals in a lab anymore. You got to be like a data whiz.
Yeah, you got to have some tech skills for sure.
That's going to make it a pretty dynamic career, I would imagine. Pretty challenging.
It keeps things exciting, that's for sure.
Yeah.
You could be out collecting samples one day.
Yeah.
And then, the next day you're writing code.
Wow.
Trying to like make sense of this huge data set. But that's actually, I think, what makes it so rewarding. You're constantly learning, right?
Yeah.
You're growing. You're actually taking what you know and applying it to real world situations.
Yeah, for sure. Which leads me to something else our sources were talking about, which is the importance of environmental justice when it comes to air pollution.
It's huge.
Because it's not just about protecting the environment, broadly. It's about making sure that everyone has access to clean air,
Absolutely. It's about equity.
regardless of where they live or their background.
Yeah. And, marginalized communities, they're often the ones who are hit hardest by air pollution.
It's true.
So air pollution analysts, they have to be really aware of that. And they can really help by, advocating for solutions that are equitable, making sure those environmental regulations are actually being enforced in a fair way.
It's about using your knowledge, your platform to give a voice to the people who might not otherwise have one. Exactly. Which is, that's huge. That adds this whole other level of meaning, I think, to this line of work.
Oh, for sure. And it also highlights something we were kind of talking about before, which is you got to be able to communicate.
Yeah.
Because you're working with community groups, you're working with government agencies,
Right.
You might even be working with businesses. So finding those solutions that work for everybody, it takes a lot of collaboration.
So it's not just about, crunching numbers. It's about understanding people.
Yeah, you got to build relationships.
It's about communication. It's about working together to create a better world for everybody, a healthier world.
Well said.
Well, this has been fascinating. This whole deep dive into the world of air pollution analysts has been so interesting. I've learned a lot. We've talked about, the science behind it, the skills you need, the challenges, but really I think what's stuck with me is the impact this field has
Yeah.
on our everyday lives, on the planet.
It's huge. It's a career path that, it's definitely demanding, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
Right.
And I think if anyone listening is passionate about the environment, if you really care about protecting public health, this is definitely a field you should check out.
Absolutely. And if this deep dive has piqued your interest, definitely go check out the show notes. We'll have links to all the sources that we talked about today.
And just remember, the air we breathe, it connects all of us. So let's all do our part to make it a little cleaner, a little healthier for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everybody.